Oh my. Alright, let's continue. The two scouts, loving the walnut. Okay, sorry. And the crucifix went up on the wall of Billy Pilgrim. The two scouts, loving the walnut stocks of their rifles in the ditch, whispered that it was time to move out again. 10 minutes had gone by without anybody's coming to see if they were hit or not, to finish them off. Whoever had shot was evidently far away and all alone. And the four crawled out of the ditch without drawing any more fire. Then they stood up and began to walk quickly. The forest was dark and old. The pines were planted in rank and file. The pines were planted in ranks and files. There was no undergrowth. 4 inches of unmarked snow blanketed the ground. The Americans had no choice but to leave trails in the snow, as unambiguous as diagrams in a book on ballroom dancing. Step, slide, rest. Step, slide, rest. Close it up and keep it closed, Roland Weary warned Billy Pilgrim as they moved out. Weary looked like Tweedledum, or Tweedledee, all bundled up for battle. He was short and thick. He had every piece of equipment he had ever been issued, every present he had ever received from home. Helmet, helmet liner, wool cap, scarf, gloves, cotton undershirt, woolen undershirt, wool shirt, sweater, blouse, jacket, overcoat, cotton underpants, woolen underpants, woolen trousers, cotton socks, woolen socks, combat boots, gas mask, canteen, mess kit, first aid kit, trench knife, blanket, shelter half, raincoat, bulletproof Bible, a pamphlet entitled Know Your Enemy, another pamphlet entitled Why We Fight, and another pamphlet of German phrases rendered in English. Of German phrases rendered in English phonetics, which would enable Weary to ask Germans questions such as, "Where is your headquarters?" And "How many howitzers do you have with you?" Or to tell them, "Surrender, your situation is hopeless," and so on. Sprachen die Howitzers? Weary had a block of balsa wood, which was supposed to be a foxhole pillow. He had a prophylactic kit containing 2 tough condoms for the prevention of disease only. He had a whistle he wasn't going to show anybody until he got promoted to corporal. He had a dirty picture of a woman attempting sexual intercourse with a Shetland pony. He had made Billy Pilgrim admire that photo several times. Huh? The woman and the pony were posed before velvet draperies, which were fringed with deedly balls. They were flanked by Doric columns. In front of one column was a potted plant, a potted palm. The picture that Weary had was a print of the first dirty photograph in history. The word photography was first used in 1839. And it was in that year, too, that Louis J.M. Daguerre revealed to the French Academy that an image formed on a silvered metal plate covered with a thin film of silver iodide could be developed in the presence of mercury vapor. In 1841, only 2 years later, an assistant to Daguerre, André Lefebvre, was arrested in the Tuileries Gardens for attempting to sell a gentleman a picture of the woman and the pony. That was where Weary bought his photo too. In the Tuileries. In the Tuileries. Sorry, I can't say things. It's just a story about a woman and her horse, okay? In the Tuileries. Lefebvre argued that the picture was fine art, and that his intention was to make Greek mythology come true, come alive. He said that the columns and the potted plant proved that. When asked which myth he meant to represent, Lefebvre replied that there were thousands of myths like that, with the woman a mortal and the pony a god. He was sentenced to 6 months of prison. He died there of pneumonia. So it goes. A Greek myth come alive. I read Greek for the myths. It's great that the first, I don't know, I think this is facts actually, but that's great. We'll look it up later. Please don't. Or please do and report back. Use a VPN. Use use incognito. Billy and the Scouts were skinny people. Roland Weary had fat to burn. He was a roaring furnace under all his layers of wool and straps and canvas. He had so much energy that he bustled back and forth between Billy and the Scouts, delivering dumb messages which nobody had sent, and which nobody was pleased to receive. He also began to suspect, since he was so much busier than anybody else, that he was the leader. He was so hot and bundled up, in fact, that he had no sense of danger. His vision of the outside world was limited to what he could see through a narrow slit between the rim of his helmet and his scarf from home. No, absolutely not that. Okay, he had so much energy that he bustled back and forth between Billy and the scouts, delivering dumb messages which nobody had sent and which nobody was pleased to receive. He also began to suspect, since he was so much busier than anybody else, that he was the leader. He was so hot and bundled up, in fact, that he had no sense of danger. His vision of the outside world was limited to what he could see through a narrow slit between the rim of his helmet and his scarf from home, which concealed his baby face from the bridge of his nose on down. He was so snug in there that he was able to pretend that he was safe at home, having survived the war, and that he was telling his parents and his sister a true war story. Whereas the true war story was still going on. Weary's version of the true war story went like this. There was a big German attack, and Weary and his anti-tank buddies fought like hell until everyone was killed but Weary. So it goes. And then Weary tied in with 2 scouts, and they became close friends immediately. And they decided to fight their way back to their own lines. They were going to travel fast. They were damned if they'd surrender. They shook hands all around. They called themselves the Three Musketeers. But then this damn college kid, who was so weak he shouldn't have even been in the army, asked if he could come along. He didn't even have a gun or a knife. He didn't even have a helmet or a cap. He couldn't even walk right. Kept bobbing up and down, driving everybody crazy, giving their position away. He was pitiful. The Three Musketeers pushed and carried and dragged the college kid all the way back to their own lines. Weary's story went. They saved his goddamned hide for him. In real life, Weary was retracing his steps, trying to find out what had happened to Billy. He told the scouts to wait while he went back for the college bastard. He passed under a low branch now. He hit the top of his helmet with a clunk. Weary didn't hear it. Somewhere, a big dog was barking. Weary didn't hear that either. His war story was at a very exciting point. An officer was congratulating the Three Musketeers, telling them that he was going to put them in for bronze stars. "Anything else I can do for you boys?" said the officer. "Yes, sir," said one of the scouts. "We'd like to stick together for the rest of the war, sir. Is there some way you can fix it up so that nobody will ever break up the Three Musketeers?" Billy Pilgrim had stopped in the forest. He was leaning against a tree with his eyes closed. His head was tilted back, and his nostrils were flaring. He was like a poet in the Parthenon. This was when Billy first came unstuck in time. His attention began to swing gradually through the full arc of his life, passing into death, which was violet light. There wasn't anybody else there or anything. There was just violet light and a hum. And then Billy swung into life again, going backwards until he was in pre-birth, which was red light and bubbling sounds. And then he swung into life again and stopped. He was a little boy, taking a shower with his hairy father at the Ilium YMCA. He smelled chlorine from the swimming pool next door, heard the springboard boom. Little Billy was terrified because his father had said Billy was going to learn to swim by the method of sink or swim. His father was going to throw Billy into the deep end, and Billy was going to damn well swim. It was like an execution. Billy was numb as his father carried him from the shower room to the pool. His eyes were closed. When he opened his eyes, he was on the bottom of the pool, and there was beautiful music everywhere. He lost consciousness, but the music went on. He dimly sensed that somebody was rescuing him. Billy resented that. From there, he traveled in time to 1965. He was 41 years old, and he was visiting his decrepit mother at Pine Knoll, an old people's home he had put her in only a month before. She had caught pneumonia and wasn't expected to live. She did live, though, for years after that. Her voice was nearly gone, so in order to hear her, Billy had to put his ear right next to her papery lips. She evidently had something very important to say. "How?" she began, and she stopped. She was too tired. She hoped that she wouldn't have to say the rest of the sentence, that Billy would finish it for her. But Billy had no idea what was on her mind. "How what, Mother?" he prompted. She swallowed hard, shed some tears. Then she gathered energy from all over her ruined body, even from her toes and fingertips. At last, she had accumulated enough to whisper this complete sentence. "How did I get so old?" Billy's antique mother passed out, and Billy was led from the room by a pretty nurse. The body of an old man covered by a sheet was wheeled by just as Billy entered from the corridor. The man had been a famous marathon runner in his day. So it goes. This was before Billy had his head broken in an airplane crash, by the way. before he became so vocal about flying saucers and traveling in time. I thought about taking a break here, but there's only 3 more pages left. If y'all want to sit tight with me. There's literally 3 pages left. Thank you. You gotta pee? Oh my god, what if chat had to pee and I had to wait for them? Wow. Alright, you go to the bathroom, chat. I'll be here. That's fine. I still haven't read Slaughterhouse 1 to 4 yet. Oh, don't worry. They're not chronological. It's alright. Yeah, 30 pages went by quick. It's because they're small pages. You're welcome. This was before Billy had his head broken in an airplane crash, by the way. Before he became so vocal about flying saucers and traveling in time. Billy sat down in a waiting room. He wasn't a widower yet. He sensed something hard under the cushion of his overstuffed chair. He dug it out, discovered that it was a book. The Execution of Private Slavic by William Bradford Huey. It was a true account of the death before an American firing squad of Private Eddie D. Slavic, 36896415. The only American soldier to be shot for cowardice since the Civil War. So it goes. Billy read the opinion of a staff judge advocate who reviewed Slavic's case, which ended like this. He has directly challenged the authority of the government, and future discipline depends upon a resolute reply to this challenge. If the death penalty is ever to be imposed for desertion, it should be imposed in this case, not as a punitive measure, nor as retribution, but to maintain that discipline upon which alone an army can succeed against the enemy. There was no recommendation for clemency in the case, and none here is recommended. So it goes. Billy blinked in 1965, traveled in time to 1958. He was at a banquet in honor of a Little League team, which his son Robert was a member. The coach, who had never been married, was speaking. He was all choked up. Honest to God, he was saying, I'd consider it an honor just to be a water boy for these kids. Billy blinked in 1958, traveled in time to 1961. It was New Year's Eve, and Billy was disgracefully drunk at a party where everybody was in optometry or married to an optometrist. Billy usually didn't drink much, because the war had ruined his stomach. But he certainly had a snoot full now, and he was being unfaithful to his wife, Valencia, for the first and only time. Great. Thank you for that. What an interesting time to be alive. Sorry about that, everybody. He was being unfaithful to his wife. For the first and only time. He had somehow persuaded a woman to come into the laundry room of the house, and then sit up on the gas dryer, which was running. The woman was very drunk herself. And she helped Billy get her girdle off. "What was it you wanted to talk about?" she said. "It's all right," said Billy. He honestly thought it was all right. He couldn't remember the name of the woman. "How come they call you Billy instead of William?" "Business reasons," said Billy. That was true. His father-in-law, who owned the Ilium School of Optometry, who had set Billy up in practice, was a genius in his field. He told Billy to encourage people to call him Billy, because it would stick in their memories. It would also make him seem slightly magical, since there weren't any other grown Billies around. It also compelled people to think of him as a friend right away. Somewhere in there was an awful scene, with people expressing disgust for Billy and the woman, and Billy found himself out in his automobile, trying to find the steering wheel. The main thing now was to find the steering wheel. At first, Billy windmilled his arms, hoping to find it by luck. When that didn't work, he became more methodical, working in such a way that the wheel could not possibly escape him. He placed himself hard against the left-hand door, searched every square inch of the area before him. When he failed to find the wheel, he moved over 6 inches and searched again. Amazingly, he was eventually hard against the right-hand door. I don't think I can finish the book. I don't think I cannot deal with this. There's literally 2 pages. What the fuck is going on? I would like to know what the fuck is going on. Thanks for ruining book club. Alright, I got this. I'm calm. I'm okay. I'm going into emote only mode. I don't care. You guys go on without me, alright? Like, literally, did you seriously just interrupt independent reading time? I will punch you. There was an awful scene. Billy and this woman, you know, he's searching for the fucking steering wheel like he's the Wolf of Wall Street. Amazingly, he was eventually hard against the right-hand door without having found the wheel. He concluded that somebody had stolen it. This angered him as he passed out. Dear reader, dear viewer, he was in the back seat of his car, which is why he couldn't find the steering wheel. Now somebody was shaking Billy awake. Billy still felt drunk, was still angered by the stolen steering wheel. He was back in World War II again, behind the German lines. The person who was shaking him was Roland Weary. Weary had gathered the front of Billy's field jacket into his hands. He banged Billy against a tree, then pulled him away from it, flung him in the direction he was supposed to take under his own power. Billy stopped, shook his head. You go on, he said. What? You guys go on without me. I'm all right. You're what? I'm okay. Jesus, I'd hate to see somebody sick, said Weary through 5 layers of humid scarf from home. Billy had never seen Weary's face. He had tried to imagine it one time, but had imagined a toad in a fishbowl. Weary kicked and shoved Billy for 1/4 of a mile. The scouts were waiting between the banks of a frozen creek. They had heard the dog. They had heard men calling back and forth, too. Calling like hunters who had a pretty good idea of where their quarry was. The banks of the creek were high enough to allow the scouts to stand without being seen. Billy staggered down the bank ridiculously. After him came Weary, clanking and clinking and tinkling and hot. Here he is, boys, said Weary. He didn't want to live, but he's gonna live anyway. When he gets out of this, by God, he's gonna owe his life to the 3 Musketeers. This was the first the scouts had heard that Weary thought of himself and them as the 3 Musketeers. Billy Pilgrim, there in the creek bed, thought he, Billy Pilgrim, was turning to steam painlessly. If everybody would leave him alone for just a little while, he thought, he wouldn't cause anybody any more trouble. He would turn to steam and float up among the treetops. Somewhere the big dog barked again. With the help of fear and echoes and winter silences, that dog had a voice like a big bronze gong. Roland Weary, 18 years old, insinuated himself between the scouts, draped a heavy arm over the shoulder of each. "So what do the three musketeers do now?" he said. Billy Pilgrim was having a delightful hallucination. He was wearing dry, warm, white sweat socks. And he was skating on a bathroom floor. On a ballroom floor, sorry. Having my own hallucination here. Billy Pilgrim was having a delightful hallucination. He was wearing dry, warm, white sweat socks, and he was skating on a ballroom floor. Thousands cheered. This wasn't time travel. It had never happened. Never would happen. It was the craziness of a dying young man with his shoes full of snow. One scout hung his head, let spit fall from his lips. The other did the same. They studied the infinitesimal effects of spit on snow and history. They were small, graceful people. They had been behind German lines many times before, living like wood creatures, living from moment to moment in useful terror, thinking brainlessly with their spinal cords. Now, they twisted out from under Weary's loving arms. They told Weary that he and Billy better find somebody to surrender to. The scouts weren't going to wait for them anymore. And they ditched Weary and Billy in the creek bed. Ditched. Billy Pilgrim went on skating, doing tricks in sweat socks. Dude, I literally have dreams about ice skating like this. Like I'm literally a fucking World War II soldier dying in a trench. Like that's like what my dreams are. I'm just skating in my socks on a ballroom floor. Billy Pilgrim went on skating, doing tricks in sweat socks. Tricks that most people would consider impossible. Making turns, stopping on a dime, and so on. The cheering went on, but its tone was altered as the hallucination gave way to time travel. Billy stopped skating, found himself at a lectern in a Chinese restaurant in Ilium, New York, on an early afternoon in the summer of 1957. On an early afternoon in the autumn of 1957, he was receiving a standing ovation from the Lions Club. He had just been elected president, and it was necessary that he speak. He was scared stiff, thought a ghastly mistake had been made. All those prosperous, solid men out there would discover now that they had elected a ludicrous waif. They would hear his reedy voice, the one he'd had in the war. He swallowed, knew that all he had for a voice box was a little whistle cut from a willow switch. Worse, he had nothing to say. The crowd quieted down. Everybody was pink and beaming. Billy opened his mouth, and out came a deep, resonant tone. His voice was a gorgeous instrument. It told jokes which brought down the house. It grew serious. It told jokes again, and ended on a note of humility. The explanation of the miracle was this. Billy had taken a course in public speaking. And then he was back in the bed of the frozen creek again. Roland Weary was about to beat the shit out of him. The living shit out of him. Weary was filled with a tragic wrath. He had been ditched again. He stuffed his pistol into its holster. He slipped his knife into its scabbard, its triangular blade and blood gutters on all three faces. And then he shook Billy hard, rattled his skeleton, slammed him against a bank. Weary barked and whimpered through his layers of scarf from home. He spoke unintelligibly of the sacrifices he had made on Billy's behalf. He dilated on the piety and heroism of the Three Musketeers, portrayed in the most glowing and impassioned hues their virtues and magnanimity, the imperishable honor they acquired for themselves, and the great services they rendered to Christianity. It was entirely Billy's fault that this fighting organization no longer existed, Weary felt, and Billy was going to pay. Weary socked Billy a good one on the side of his jaw, knocked Billy away from the bank and onto the snow-covered ice of the creek. Billy was down on all fours on the ice, and Weary kicked him in the ribs, rolled him over on his side. Billy tried to form himself into a ball. "You shouldn't even be in the army," said Weary. Billy was involuntarily making convulsive sounds that were a lot like laughter. "You think it's funny, huh?" Weary inquired. He walked around to Billy's back. Billy's jacket and shirt and undershirt had been hauled up around his shoulders by the violence, so that his back was naked. There, inches from the tips of Weary's combat boots, were the pitiful buttons of Billy's spine. Weary drew back his right boot, aimed a kick at the spine, at the tube which had so many of Billy's important wires in it. Weary was going to break that tube. But then Weary saw that he had an audience. 5 German soldiers and a police dog on a leash were looking down into the bed of the creek. The soldiers' blue eyes were filled with a bleary civilian curiosity as to why one American should try to murder another so far from home, and why the victim should laugh. Finished. Thank you for listening to Chapter 2 of Slaughterhouse Five, The Children's Crusade. God bless. I'm gonna go take a break now. smoke a cigarette, and you can go to bed if you want, or you can stay and do whatever you want to do on the internet. Holy shit. If I ever started a prog rock band, we will be called Billy Pilgrim and the Flibberty Gibbets as our first album. And our first album will be Beast in the Rumpus Room, and it'll be about time travel. Dude, thank you so much, Anonymous. And thank you for $200 with your goddamn message. And I'll join your band. Thank you, Moose.